I can't make it up. I barely graduated from Lincoln Way High School, and my parents did their best to make ends meet. My mom was a school bus driver, my dad was a landscaper, but they did have a hard time of it, and they actually lost our house to the bank, and I was homeless for a while. I lived on my friend's couch in an apartment in Joliet that had cockroaches. It was a roof over my head, but it wasn't ideal. And two things actually happened to cause me to turn my life around. One is I started dating my now wife, who is a Lincoln Way grad, went to school with me here at Lincoln Way. And you know, she was always a goody-goody honor roll type, and you don't want to look bad in front of your girl. The other thing is my uncle was murdered. When my uncle was murdered, that caused me to turn my life around. I reevaluated my life and the choices I was making. I went back to school, and now the kid who had a 1.0 at Lincoln Way High School now has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, an MBA from Notre Dame, a law degree from UIC, and a second law degree from Duke. So I feel like I'm very much a product of second chances, and when I go into court, my mission is to make sure everyone has a fair chance. A little bit about me professionally. I've been a judge since 2010. I'm running for the appellate court mainly because there are 54 judges on that court. Roughly half of them are from Cook County. None are from Will County. We've never had elected representation on the second highest court in Illinois from Will County ever, and I think we deserve some. I'd like to point out as well that the State Bar Association gave me a highly recommended rating. They give ratings to judges and judicial candidates. That is the highest possible rating that they give. And out of the 7 people running for the appellate court in the 3rd District, I'm the only one who got a highly recommended rating from the Illinois State Bar Association. I've been endorsed by a number of community leaders and also a number of labor organizations, including, I think, 4 teachers' unions, the Illinois Nurses Association, United Auto Workers. I was also named the 2018 Judicial Officer of the Year by the Illinois State Crime Commission, and I hear chancery cases here in Will County. I generally hear what are commonly referred to as the most complex cases in our court system. I like hearing those cases because they're challenging. I don't know, is there a timer?
Yes, it just went off.
Oh, all right. John Anderson, running for appellate court. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to make sure everybody can hear. I know I'm hearing a lot of noise from the restaurant. Is everybody okay in the back?
Good.
Yes.
I am Joe Hettel. I'm an appellate court judge, and I'm here to ask you for your vote and to answer your questions. Your decision in this race is very important. When an appellate court judge is elected, they will stay there for 10 years before they have to run for retention. And I'm asking for your vote because I'm a person who you can trust. So says the guy with the microphone, right? I have been a judge now for 18 years, and as a judge, it has been my pleasure and I think my responsibility to be involved in my profession. And during that time period, I have been twice appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court, once as a circuit judge, and then to this particular position. The chief judges, I don't want to get too much into the weeds about this, but the judges that run each individual circuit ask people to do certain important jobs. One of those jobs is to mentor new judges. And over the last 10 years, I have mentored new judges as they come into the system. We also evaluate judges, not necessarily at a yearly basis, but on a regular basis. And I'm a facilitator for those evaluations. The people that I've worked with throughout my career have looked to me for leadership. They've looked to me to help out and to make our profession better. I grew up on a farm in Fall River Township, Illinois, not in Cook County, as somebody mentioned to me at some point in time. I'm all for rooting for the home team. I believe that's a wonderful way to look at a basketball game or a football game, but not crime and punishment and not your lives and your livelihood. This is not a legislator who's going to bring back the bacon. This is a judge who is going to apply the law fairly to the facts. I have a lot of respect for my opponent, but I think it's misleading to think that local representation is an important issue in this case. Having a competent judge, having a compassionate person, and having someone who is going to be fair to whoever steps up in front of him is really what's important. I think one thing that really distinguishes the two of us is I have a much broader scope of experience. not just because of where I was. The fact that I'm from a smaller community allowed me, 1 minute left, allowed me, 1 second left. I'm sure a lot of this will come out in the questions, so thank you very much for being here.
Hello everyone, my name is Colette Safford. I am running for Circuit Judge in Will County. And as Annette said, I will also want to thank all the townships that have come together to put on this forum. I think it's extremely important when we think about judicial races that you know who your candidates are. And I know we'll get into a lot of the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, about our different backgrounds. But a little bit about me. I am the proud daughter of a Vietnam veteran who earned the Purple Heart in Vietnam. And why that's important is because through my father, I learned early on about making sacrifices for your fellow man. And that's really why I'm on this journey here today, because this race is just as much about you as it is about me. We need to have judges on the bench that you could be proud of, that if your family member, your loved one, your neighbor or co-worker needed to be in front of a judge, that they can know, even if they don't agree with the decision, that they've been heard, that they've been treated fairly, that they have been valued. So I spent a good chunk of my legal career fighting for children and families, making sure the most vulnerable adults with disabilities have representation and advocacy. I've served as a guardian ad litem in court, which is a nice way to say the eyes and ears for the judge, to help make recommendations about what's in the best interest for those who are vulnerable. I have a vast legal background. I have in my personal life, I also serve as one of the commissioners for the Plainfield Park District. I've served on the Joliet Zoning Board of Appeals. I have been appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court to the Committee on Character and Fitness. And most importantly, I believe in community safety. And so I'm very honored to have been selected as a contract attorney to work with the state appellate prosecutor to make sure that bad guys, that those people that want to do harm to the community are detained until they have their day in court. So thank you.
And on behalf of Phil, he's absent. This wasn't important enough for him to come, so he's absent. Let's just move on to the questions for the judges. We'll start with Judge Anderson, and then just what made you want to become a lawyer? Well, you sort of went over that a little bit already. Made you want to leave that field to become a judge, and why are you running for judge now?
I kind of covered this already. Here's what made me want to become a lawyer. I mentioned to you that when my uncle was murdered, that caused me to turn my life around. My uncle's killer was found not guilty by reason of insanity. That is what actually caused me to decide to go to law school. And I wanted to, I wanted to seek out justice in the world. I was interested in civil rights law, human rights law. I've written law review articles on these topics. I love legal writing, and actually a big part of being in the appellate court is legal writing and analysis. All rulings from the appellate court are in writing. And so I've written probably 9 or 10 pretty comprehensive articles on various legal topics. My work has been cited at law reviews at Harvard and Yale. And I just wanted to make a difference in the world. And I feel like I'm doing that. I'm not, we all think about things we could have been doing, or maybe things that we wish opportunities we had. But when I see the difference I make in people's lives, I think I'm following the right path. Not too long ago, I had a transgender person that came into my courtroom. It was just to change their name, and it wasn't really. It's kind of routine for me. And they broke down into tears. They told me that I gave them the best day they've ever had in their life. So those kinds of things really touch my soul. running for the appellate court, as I said, because we've never had local representation on that court. And it's true that, you know, judges all follow the statute, and the statutes are generally the same. There's local ordinances and county ordinances, but judges exercise discretion in a lot of cases, and we exercise that discretion through the lens of our own experiences. And it seems to me that a judge from Will County has had different experiences than a judge who might be from, you know, whether it's Macon County or wherever else in the state.
How much time is this, Annette? 2 minutes? Okay. Similar to what John had said, but I think a little bit different. I was a college athlete, and when that dream became obvious that it was not going to continue, I realized it was time to get serious about academics and serious about what kind of mark I was going to make in the world. And being a lawyer, for some people, it's something that lawyers. To me, it was something that I knew I could affect change, protect people's rights, and make an impact in life. And that's why I went to law school. After going to law school, I became a prosecutor. My first job was an assistant state's attorney. I loved to be in the courtroom. There's basically two kinds of lawyers. You're either someone who tries cases and goes to the courtroom, or someone who's a transactional attorney who doesn't go to the courtroom, or you can be an appellate court lawyer, where you're looking at the decisions that were made. My entire career has been either in the well of a courtroom or on the bench for the last 18 years. And seeing what goes on and seeing how people are treated has probably been the most beneficial or the most rewarding part of being a judge. I have had the ability throughout my life, and I think I have to thank my parents for that, to listen and to be empathetic to people in their situation. I think one of my strong suits as a trial judge was the ability to make people relax when they were in a very uncomfortable position. It's another day for us on the bench, but it's probably the most important day of many people's lives when they come to the courtroom. And now, as an appellate court judge, which I've been doing now for 19 months, over a year and a half, you look at what other judges did. That's our job. So we review those cases, and it's the last stop for most people after the case goes to the circuit court. You don't automatically have a right to the Supreme Court. So having done it that long and looking at it through that lens, you can see when judges aren't following those same rules. And my timer's going off too.
So my progression as being an attorney evolved. And so I've always worked in industries where I had to service people and also advocate for people. So when I had an opportunity to go to law school, I took that opportunity. And as a practicing attorney, to have the ability to advocate for family and kids, and to kind of know that niche area of the law, it really piqued my interest in running for judge, because I want to be able to make those decisions that really matter to families. And another reason is that when you deal with children in foster care, not a lot of attorneys go into that area. And so it's really important to have judges that understands the impact of trauma on young adults. And also because I believe in safe communities. And I realize that this is a very unique opportunity whenever we have a vacancy on the bench to be able to have a say, especially with the Pretrial Fairness Act known as the Safety Act. And so I think that's extremely important, because we have to make sure that our communities are safe. And so I want to be able to exercise that discretion to be able to make those decisions, because when our communities are safe, our neighborhoods thrive, our businesses grow, and people are more tolerant of each other. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to bring that to the bench.
Thank you all. Just so everyone is clear, these two judges are running against each other, and we love them both. And Colette is running against the invisible man here, he's from circuit court. Just so we're clear. Here, running for appellate, and then Colette and Phil are running for circuit. And you each get 2 minutes to answer. Feel free to, make it short, but if you have more to say, of course, please. Okay, so this one will start with Judge Hettel. And if you could just expound on any of these, because a lot of these you've sort of already covered in your...
Louder.
I'm sorry?
Louder.
Okay, sure. I'll just get on the microphone more. Would you please explain why your experience makes you the best candidate, and for a frame of reference, like how many different firms have you ever worked for? Have you worked for government agencies? If so, how many and for how long? Do you have private practice or government experience or both? Please explain how your experience makes you the best candidate.
Thank you. As I said before, I started as an assistant state's attorney, and that was probably inspired from working 26 in California, which is a criminal courts building in Cook County. It is like watching a movie. It is one of the most life-changing events that I've ever had. To walk into one of those courtrooms, the bigger, the old, where The Untouchables was filmed, to talk to a witness who's actually outside of that door is how far away you are. But to see the lawyers and the talent and the people and the drive and passion that they had inspired me. It was an opportunity to push myself to a place that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with. I'm talking too much these days, but I was a little shy back then, and it was inspiring. So I became an assistant state's attorney, and did that for a pretty short time, and a local law firm contacted me and said they wanted to hire me. So I was in private practice in my community. That meant you weren't going to do one thing, you were going to do several things. So I did quite a bit of family law work and criminal defense work, along with wills, trusts in the states, and just about anything that would come through the door that we felt confident enough to do. I ran for state's attorney in my county in 2000, and that was the first time I was ever involved in a political race 24 years ago. It was probably the best job that I've ever had, most challenging job that I ever had, because you make decisions about people's lives, who was going to be charged with the crime, who was not going to be charged with the crime. I sat down not only with the victims and the victims' families, I sat down with the defendants' families when they had a complaint about how they were being treated. Some of the most powerful things that I learned about how our system touches people were in that job. The first day I sat down, I was in front of 5 or 6 families, most of them separated, in a sexual assault case where a juvenile actually was the defendant in the case, and it touched every single one of those people's lives. And they were very upset, and trying to give them answers your first day of the job is not easy, and I spent too much time on one thing, so I'll hand it over to Colette.
So my experience certainly makes me the best candidate. So as I stated earlier in my introduction, I started with the Public Defender's Office in Will County. And with that, if you know anything about that, it's a high volume area. And there I represented families that were involved in DCFS litigation, as well as minors charged with crimes. I tried cases in that assignment, as well as contested hearings. I also have worked with private firms, a prominent firm in Joliet and also a prominent firm in Chicago. And I've done a lot of civil litigation and also represented receivers, foreclosure, prosecution, and whatnot. And so from there I went to private practice. But I also want to talk a little bit about my government experience. I currently serve as the attorney for our Will County Executive, Jennifer Bertino. And so in that role, you can imagine the things that will come across your desk as an attorney. And I believe that government experience, dealing with municipality, local government law, FOIA, zoning issues, all of those things I handle. And I also do that currently in my private practice as well. So being in private practice, that allows you to be able to work on a variety of cases. And I really think that's important, is because a judge does not have a single focus. You need to be able to draw upon multiple experiences within the law, your work as an attorney, things you've encountered in life, to be able to make the best decisions. And so I also want to mention about my appellate practice. And so I have served as a court-appointed appellate attorney. That means that a judge had a case that the parties had a right to appeal. They couldn't afford their own attorney, so I was appointed to be their appellate attorney. And I think that's a big deal to be able to do that. And now currently I continue that work by working for the State Appellate Prosecutor's Office by writing appeals related to the Safety Act.
Annette, that question has a lot of parts to it. I'll do my best to do it in 2 minutes. When I got out of law school, I was offered a clerkship with one of the judges on the Illinois Supreme Court, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I left my clerkship and worked at a large commercial litigation law firm in Chicago, but I also, on the side, with their permission, I was an independent contractor with the State Appellate Prosecutor's Office, so I do have a criminal background as well. I help prosecute cases in the in the appellate court, people who had already been convicted of crimes in the trial court. I assisted in the pretrial appeal in the Drew Peterson case, and for I think a couple of years I handled grand jury returns, so I do have some criminal background. I was named the Judge of the Year by the Illinois State Crime Commission, and as I mentioned before, our peers, other judges, other lawyers, did a deep dive on our backgrounds and determined that I was the only one in the race who was highly recommended. I've tried to avoid, the question was, why am I the best candidate? That's a tricky question because I've tried to avoid comparisons with Joe. Joe is my friend, we've been friends for years. I don't want to say anything bad about Joe, but I'm going to mention to you the guy on the Republican side. He is an extreme conservative. Clerk for Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. He's involved with the Federalist Society. And my Republican friends in DuPage County tell me that if my opponent wins the primary, there's going to be an all-out frontal assault on his background. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I haven't wanted to get into any of that stuff, but I think that when we talk about who the best person is to win the primary, we also have to think about who's the best person to win in the fall. And my experience matches up far better with the Republican than my opponent's does on any number of levels. And the Republicans are going to make this race filthy dirty in the fall.
Okay, this one, we'll start with Colette on this one. How many jury trials have you had as a lawyer or a judge as opposed to bench trials? Or do you think your experience is sufficient for the position you are running for, and why?
So the decision to have, in a criminal case, the decision to have a jury trial rests with the defendant. So they have the right to be tried by a jury of their peers or in front of the presiding judge. And so that's always a decision that, in consultation with your attorney, as to whether or not they should go in front of their peers. And certainly when cases involve legal, technical information or decisions along those lines, it's best to have those things decided by a judge. And so I am very proud of my successful trial record. Every case that I have tried, my clients have won. And so I will put my trial record up against anyone that's in this race. And so I think that that's certainly important to be able to have those advocacy skills, to be able to advocate for your client, and to also be able to negotiate when you are able to do so. And so I think I'll be totally fine on the bench given my trial experience. I have no reason to believe that anything other than that, and I want the voters to know that I am fully prepared on day one to handle a criminal matter down to a civil matter.
Okay, the question was how many jury trials and bench trials have I handled? I'll be honest with you, that number is so high, I have no idea. And I'm gonna be willing to guess that Joe would probably have a similar answer. We've both done a lot of them. It's been over 100. And I've done bench trials and jury trials as a judge. I've handled criminal trials as a judge as well as civil trials. The bulk of my experience in the last many years is doing bench trials. I'm assigned to two different categories of cases. The first one is chancery cases. So that's when you're suing for something other than money. So maybe you want an injunction. Maybe you want a statute declared unconstitutional. Maybe you're litigating your tax assessment. The second category of cases I hear involve cases where you're suing or being sued for more than $50,000 and you don't want a jury to hear the case. So most of what I do are bench trials, but I've done more jury trials than I could even really begin to remember.
For those of you that have been in a courtroom, typically a trial, a jury room, is set up with two tables, the prosecution, the defense, or the plaintiff and the defendant in a civil case, and then the judge. So we're talking about jury trials. I guess the way to express it best for me is I've been in every different position in that courtroom. I have been the judge and presided over medical malpractice cases. I think the first year or two that I was a judge, I probably did 6 or 7 because there was a backlog on those. But to try a murder case as a prosecutor, as the person giving the closing argument in a case and talking to a jury of your peers about why they should pick someone of that sort of crime, to try a bench trial on a case similar, not guilty by reason of insanity. It was probably, it was the first murder trial I ever had as a state's attorney. But probably the best decision I ever made in a case that basically lost. The mother of the victim in that case and the mother of the defendant in that case hugged each other outside of the courtroom after it was over. And that was hard to believe that they could get to that point after what had happened in their lives, both of them ruined by those actions. But the fact that they had an opportunity to hear the expert witnesses testify in that case allowed them hopefully to have some peace. And that drama that goes on in a courtroom is compelling, and you need people who have experienced it on the next level in the appellate court. So I have tried cases as a prosecutor, I've defended cases as a defense attorney, and certainly as a judge. So my experience is 30 years, and 18 of those, more than half of my professional career on the bench.
Thank you. Now we'll start with the beginning. With John, what is your approach toward adjudicating cases, and how are you best suited to serve on the bench compared to your opponent?
I think Joe didn't hear the question. The question was, what is your approach to adjudicating cases, and why are you the best person to serve on the appellate court? All right, so my approach to adjudicating cases, first of all, the main thing is follow the law. That's where it begins and ends. If I wanted to be a legislator, I would run for the legislature. I wear a black robe. And by the way, I'm a Democrat. I've been involved with our local Democrat Party here in Will County for the last 20 years, but I wear a black robe. I don't wear a blue one. I don't wear a red one. And when I go into court, everybody is treated the same. I've never asked anybody, how did you vote in the last primary, before I rule in a case. And I think that if I like every ruling I make in a case, I'm not doing my job. There are plenty of times I rule on cases where I don't like my ruling. I don't necessarily think it's fair, but I follow what the legislature directs me to do. Again, why would I be better for this job than my opponent? Those are questions I hate answering in that, because I don't want to. I like my opponent. We've been friends for a long time. Here's what I'll say. The appellate court, I mentioned, it involves legal writing. I've been lauded for my legal writing skills. And in fact, the Illinois Bar Journal, I think 2 issues ago, had a cover story on legal writing, and they interviewed some of the best judges who are the best legal writers in the judiciary, and I was included in that article, and I felt very blessed. I have clerked for a judge on the Illinois Supreme Court, 2 judges on the appellate court, and I'm trusted to hear the most complicated cases in our court system. And so I think that I was built for this appellate court job. Thank you.
The way your judicial philosophy, I think, is what the case, what the question is calling for. People need to understand what the system is for. We started a court system to prevent people from hurting each other, to try to get people past disputes, and to try to have a civilized society where we respected the law. Unfortunately, in this country, we've kind of gotten away from that recently with particular leadership that may be coming back around again. So whenever someone comes into my courtroom, it is my job to make sure that they understand what the rules are and to know how they're going to be treated and that they're going to be treated fairly. On the appellate court, it is my job, along with 2 other judges, we sit in panels of 3 and make those decisions, to make sure that the judge that heard that case understands that and applied the law properly. Certainly we start with the law, the interpretation of a statute. It's plain, that's what it is. And then you apply the facts. So knowing people and looking at people in trial court was something I felt I had a very good sense of, but I was also smart enough not to believe that I had some special power to determine whether someone was lying or telling the truth. So the philosophy is, this is an important thing that people need to trust it. If they don't trust the court system, they're really not accomplishing anything, because that's really the goal. And my opponent and I are friends. I think, as I said before, I'm much more diverse, but I don't know why my friend is trying to end my career. So, well, we're cordial. That is not something I would have done to him.
Why can't she? I think she should answer that.
Well, she's not a judge yet. She's.
What about best suited
Or how, okay, well, what is your, how would your, what would your
I mean,
approach
it
be?
seems obvious, but.
So, because I write a lot of appeals, I'm able to review a lot of court transcripts. I'm able to see and read how the appellate court applies the law when you're reviewing decisions, how they come to their rationale. And I think that puts me in a unique position, better than my opponent, because as a circuit judge, when I'm making those decisions, I'm able to think about, if it were to go to reviewing court, how they look at things, how they come to that rationale and make decisions. So I think that gives me a unique perspective than my opponent to be able to do so. But certainly, as John said, we start with the law. We don't legislate from the bench. And so I think that because of my experience in research and writing and in advocacy on the appellate level, that puts me in a great position to be able to not make certain mistakes that sometimes the trial court judges may have made, because I'm able to Monday morning quarterback, if you will, by doing appellate practice.
Okay, this time we'll begin with Joe. Is there a case that you worked on, either as a lawyer or a judge, that has had a significant impact on you personally? You already went over a couple probably, but personally, or a significant impact on the way you view the judicial system? Let me repeat that. Is there a case you worked on, either as a lawyer or a judge, that has had a significant impact on you personally, or a significant impact on the way you view the judicial system? Please explain.
I talked about one that certainly had a significant impact, but there was another one that might have been more impactful. My daughter turned 23 yesterday, and when I was the state's attorney, I was called out on a Saturday. I was out mowing the grass and had a pair of shorts on. Pretty warm, if I remember right, sweating, and there had been a child physical abuse case, and they were starting to go through the house to try to gather evidence, and went to the crime scene and found a detective that was there, Rodney Petrowski is his name, and Rodney had been there for about 18 hours straight, trying to figure out what had happened. And this little girl was the same age as my daughter, kind of somewhat similar in look, actually. But we, and it's a long story, but as the case went on, we ended up going to Peoria where she was in the pediatric ICU. I actually drove the squad car down there because he needed to try to sleep, which he didn't do. But when I got there and walked into the hospital and came to the desk to explain to him what we were there for, I could just feel the weight of the stares that were on me, because the nurses and the staff thought I was the father that had abused the child. That case went on, and he was convicted in 29 of the 30 possible years that he could have, but the child's mother was there trying to cover this whole thing up. And that was being played out at the exact same time that we were down at the St. Francis in Peoria. But I just got a call from the woman that adopted the child. Her name's been changed since that time, but she is profoundly handicapped at this point and confined to a wheelchair. But that was probably the case that affected me more than any case in my career.
So I'll quickly tell you about two cases that will stay with me forever. And the reason being is that both of these cases, the young families had no one else to turn to but myself because of the work that I did with kids in foster care. And so oftentimes when you think about foster care, you think about the cases in which kids should be removed from their parents. But I want you to think about cases in which they should not because of a wrongful medical-based allegation. And so quickly I'll tell you about a young family who just had their first child. They're in their early 20s, just started their marriage. The child was born with a birth defect. And so they were out on the summer day in their backyard. The baby received a staph infection. So because the baby had other medical issues going on, the first hospital tried to get blood, was not able to, and so they sent the baby to a different hospital. And there was an overzealous doctor at that hospital. Because the infection mimicked a burn, she believed that the parents had burnt the baby. And so this young family had lost custody of their child for almost 8 months. And I was able to return the baby home, but I had to make sure that I worked with medical experts who was able to prove that the baby really had an infection and was not burned. And why that case is important is because I worked alongside the state's attorney who had a different role. And she was able to trust and believe in me and my medical experts to be able to return to help get the baby home. Another case I'll quickly tell you about is a young girl who had just started her college career to become a teacher. She was in her senior year ready to graduate, and she was babysitting for a friend, and her dog bit the baby that she was babysitting. DCFS was involved. They indicated my client for neglect. And so for 50 years, her name would, so 50 years her name would be on the state central register, which means that she could never teach, she could never work with kids, she could never even go on a field trip when she had her own kids. And so we fought that case at the administrative level. When DCFS would not overturn that indicated finding, we took the case to circuit court. And she won. And now she can teach. They reversed that finding. And why that will stay with me, think about being 21 years old and a decision just follows you for the rest of your life. Your career is over. Your schooling is over. And not a lot of attorneys like to do that work. And I stayed with her because I believed in her and I wanted her to be able to have a future. And to this day, she had a baby. She emails me pictures of the baby, and she's just so grateful, and I'll always remember being able to give her her life back.
You know, I grew up 45 seconds from here, and every time I have to deal with a case where somebody is going to lose their home, I admit I have a difficult time keeping it together. So those always impact me in a profound way. But the one I want to tell you about is I was a young judge, a brand new judge, maybe not young, but a brand new judge hearing divorce cases, which I had never handled in my life. And one morning, a young boy is in my court, and I'll tell you about this kid. He was from New Lenox, actually. Perfect captain of the football team, straight A student, student government, all the things. And he was shaking like a leaf. The reason why he was such a good kid and had it all together was because he didn't have a father and his mother was a mess. And he had to have it together. He was shaking like a leaf because his mom had been arrested on a drug charge, and his father, he'd never seen his father since he was like 2 years old. I think the kid was 13. And the father's aunt read about it in the paper, that the mother had been arrested. And so the father drives up from, I think it was Virginia, and files an emergency motion for custody of this kid that this kid didn't even know who this guy was. And this kid thought that I was going to enter a court order making him go live with a perfect stranger. And the mother could not afford an attorney. And every time I think about this case, I want to know what the kid is doing. And I shouldn't admit this, but every once in a while I Google him. I just want to make sure he's doing okay in life. She couldn't afford a lawyer. And that has put me on, that has caused me to always think about cases where people can't afford lawyers. You know, everything is getting more expensive, right? Legal fees are not getting cheap either. And if I had to go to court for something, I don't know that I could afford a lawyer if I needed one. So I'm always very empathetic with people who can't afford lawyers. I always make sure that they understand the process, what's going on, how it's impacting them, and I want them to know the resources that are available to them. My time.
Great stories. All right, this next question we'll start with Colette. What activities would you plan to undertake to further the improvement of the legal system?
So two things. One thing I believe in is access to justice. So the Illinois Supreme Court have done a tremendous job in increasing access to justice. I want to further that, as John just said, it is very expensive to retain an attorney. And to be able to make sure that those who choose not to or aren't able to afford an attorney has access to justice. Another thing is that as a circuit court judge, you have a hand, you vote on attorneys who apply to become an associate judge. I think that's one of the single most effective things that I can do as a circuit judge, is to act as a gatekeeper. Because if I can help make sure with my vote that we have judges who share our values in community, respect for all, inclusion, then that is certainly important. And I think that will further the way we feel about the justice system. Because when you think about a system, an institution of power, you want to make sure that, you know, that everything is fair, that things are working the way that it doesn't. Because when you go up against a powerful institution and you feel that you don't have any recourse, you can't fight back, it kind of does something to your self-worth and your self-esteem. So I want to make sure that we have judges all across Will County that mirrors our common goals. I understand everyone have different political backgrounds, but it's certainly important that we all have the basic building blocks, which means we believe in safe neighborhoods. We believe in being fair. We believe in being inclusive. And so that's what I think one of the single best things that I can do, that if I am elected to make sure that I vote for judges, attorneys to become associate judges who share those values And again, making sure access to justice is important so that people are able to access the court system.
When we talk about our impact on the courts, I think, again, access to justice, I think, is the biggest thing. When we talk about access to justice, what that means is just making the court system user-friendly, making it affordable for people. And I'd like to talk about what I've done in the past in that regard. Before I became a judge, I served on the board of directors of an organization called the Lawyers Trust Fund. The Lawyers Trust Fund raises money through a few different sources, and then they donate it to organizations that provide no-cost or low-cost legal support. So organizations like Cabrini Green Legal Clinic, Prairie State Legal Services, Will County Legal Aid. And so during my tenure on the Lawyers Trust Fund board, I helped raise and distribute roughly $40 million to organizations that provided free legal help. I also helped implement a series of self-help videos when I was on the county board. So if you got sued, there was a video. I've been sued, what do I do? You can watch the video. I need an order of protection against my boyfriend, he's abusive, what do I do? And you can watch the video. I'm afraid those videos are not on the circuit clerk's website anymore, they've gone a little bit out of date. So one of the things I'd like to do is work on implementing a new series of videos. I also think that we need to make the court system more user-friendly for people who cannot afford lawyers. There are a few things, for example, let's say you own your own company, and let's say it's an LLC, your own company, maybe it's a landscaping company like my dad used to have. If you get sued for whatever reason, you cannot represent your own company in court. If it's an LLC or a corporation, I don't like that rule. I follow it because I have to. But I think that if you have your own company and you're the sole shareholder, you ought to be able to represent your company in court. I think that we can make the appeals process easier for people. I think we can put more records online and make them more accessible to the public. So I'm always in favor of transparency. And I think that we need to work with the Appellate Lawyers Association and other groups to maybe have like a pro bono day in the appellate court where lawyers will maybe provide some services at no cost to people who can't afford it. And I'm not expecting all lawyers to work for free, but you'd be surprised at how many judges in the Will County Courthouse have pro bono day, and so many lawyers donate their time to help. Thank you.
In addition to the things that I talked about before, mentoring young judges and judicial evaluations, as an attorney, I donated my time to do those things. Prairie State Legal Services is a wonderful legal aid service that asks lawyers to volunteer and asks lawyers to serve the public on a regular basis. The other things that I've done as a leader in the judiciary, I think, are also important. The Illinois Judges Association and the different goals that they have. The Illinois Judges Foundation is the charitable wing of that. I'm an executive member of the foundation itself. But access to justice, as the other lawyers have talked about, is something I actually have an opinion on that might be a little different than other people, and that is that giving, two kids, baseball bats or swords or whatever you want to put them in and to combat each other, it's not going to resolve a dispute. And we have an adversarial system. When you put untrained people in that system and ask them to advocate on their own behalf in a situation where they are not objective about what's going on, they'll be in the same shoes as a lawyer who represents themselves, having a fool for a client. We need to work on alternative dispute resolution. We need to try to get people to resolve their differences as opposed to giving them a format to combat each other about their differences. It happens all the time, and it's happening more and more as we have more pro se litigants. It's a tool, it's an opportunity to jab at the other side, and it just festers a wound that's already there. And then judicial education, I've been involved, I've taught as a circuit court judge. Mary Kay O'Brien asked me when I first went on the appellate court to teach at my first appellate court conference. That was a little bit intimidating at first, but it turned out okay. Thank you.
Okay, question, we'll start with Judge Anderson. What do you feel is the appropriate demeanor for a judge?
Well, I'm guessing that everyone has watched Judge Judy. Everyone has seen movies where a judge goes bonkers at somebody. And to be honest with you, I can't speak to how every judge acts, but that's not me. Generally speaking, let me start with people who are not represented by lawyers. If you are being sued in my court and you are representing yourself in like a business dispute or something like that, you're probably swimming in some very deep water and you probably don't know what you're doing. And you could very easily damage yourself. And so I always try to treat people with patience and respect. I try to explain things as well as I am allowed, but I'm also not allowed to give legal advice. So that's a line I need to, I'm okay to walk up to the line, but I cannot cross it. When I'm dealing with lawyers, again, I always try to have respect for them. I've been in their situation before. I've been in a situation where I've got, a dozen or 15 or 20 judges in various cases that have given me deadlines, and every single one of them expects their deadlines to be met. So I try to have some patience. I always get very high marks from the lawyers. They do this thing called a bar poll, and that is one component of what goes into the bar evaluations, where I mentioned that I have the highest rating. One of those gets into demeanor, and I've always done very well on those. And frankly, I think Joe does as well, and I'm sure that Colette would. Just having patience with people is the most important thing. We can't give legal advice, but if you don't have a lawyer, I try to make sure people have. I make sure that they know what resources are available to them. Sometimes I send them to the law library. Sometimes I give them the forms. Occasionally I'll fill out the forms for them, depending on what it is, because that makes my life easier too. But I think having a solid, patient demeanor is important. And every once in a while, there's a lawyer that tests my patience, and I don't blow up at them. I might say, counsel, you have my attention now. Congratulations.
I always used to tell my assistant state's attorneys that not being a horse's ass will take you a long way in life. You can't treat people poorly, particularly when you're in a position of power. And at that point in time, they were representing me as assistant state's attorneys. Treating people with the respect and dignity that they have is, I think, essential to being a judge. I always would tell the other judges when I was mentoring them, you are your own person when you don't have that robe on, and don't ever wear it in the hallway because it loses its power. It's like Batman's cape. You need to take on that responsibility when you have that responsibility, not to wear it around like you are some special person just because you're a judge. And that's really the way I think about my job. It is an honor and a privilege to do what I do. I think I have experience and the background to do it, and just kind of the mindset to do it. The bar poll keeps coming up here. It scored 2 points higher on that raw poll that John was talking about. Very close. It's margin in the difference, but since it was brought up again, I thought I would respond to that. Thank you.
So we talked a lot about the intellectual skills, but certainly judges need to have the soft skills. Judges set the tone in the courtroom. So if the judge has patience, even keel, nice demeanor, so will their clerks, so will the bailiff, so will the court personnel, because they will take the lead from the judge. That's certainly important, because if someone's cell phone accidentally goes off, we don't need a judge who's going to fly off the handle, or their staff going to fly off the handle. So you have to be able to have patience. You also have to be able to handle stress, because it's a stressful situation. People are going to be expecting you to make decisions on the spot, and you have to be able to handle stress. You also have to be able to work well with others, because as a circuit judge, you're going to be making decisions with the other 15 circuit judges. So you have to be light, you have to be able to get along with people for the betterment of the courthouse. And so I think that is certainly important. You have to have people skills, because at the end of the day, being a judge is about people. You have to love people and care about people. And so I don't think that that's something that when you become a judge that you have all these attributes. It's either in you or it's not. And I am very proud of my record for always being an empathetic, compassionate person. When I am not working or serving in other capacities, one of the things that gives me joy is to volunteer for one of our local hospice affiliations. And the reason I do that is I choose to sit with individuals that are at the end of their life and their family is not there yet. Because we have to have dignity for everyone in all situations. And you'll be surprised how much that is about me. It's them, what you're learning about living when somebody else is making their transition. And so having that compassion and respect for others, that dignity, that's gonna serve me well as a judge. Even if someone doesn't like the decision that I'm gonna make, I'm gonna be able to make sure that they feel valued and heard.
All right, nicely done, folks. Let's do our summaries. A minute each.
Sure, who would like to go?
We'd always like to go last.
You know what? Democracy cannot exist without a fair judiciary. And a judiciary cannot exist without the trust and confidence of the people. I'm the only one to get the highest possible rating that the Illinois State Bar Association gives. I'd also like to point out that many of the rights that we hold dear, the rights that we've taken for granted for a long time, are under attack. Whether it's reproductive rights, voting rights, the right to love who you want to love, the right to read the books you want to read. No matter what the United States Supreme Court does to obliterate its own legitimacy, we still have an Illinois state constitution. It has a due process clause. It has its own equal protection clause. It has its own privacy clause. It has voter protections. So no matter what the U.S. Supreme Court does, I will continue to be an Illinois judge that protects your rights under Illinois law.
Please look me up, JudgeJohnnyAnderson.com.
And that's particularly important right now because the United States Supreme Court has changed the rules, so to speak. 50 years of stare decisis of the cases that were filed are gone. So all the cases that we use to make our decisions in some way go back to some of those previous cases. So the appellate court, who had been running on somewhat cruise control for a very long time, responding to their own cases and cases that had gone to the Illinois courts, is going to be asked to do a lot more that's done in the past. The analogy I like to use is a mother and their two children trying to walk in the grocery store or through the park, and you need leadership in the appellate court. You need someone that's going to be able to walk with two people, and sometimes that child's going to walk in a different direction, and sometimes you have to let go. But you need two people to make a decision in the appellate court, and I have been able throughout my legal career and throughout my life to have people listen and to follow me if they thought I was making the right decisions, and that's going to be an important part of this job as we go forward. Please don't settle, vote for Hettel.
I would just close by saying this is your moment. This is your chance right now, because opportunities, countywide vacancies don't come around often. So this is the chance for you, by voting for me, to be able to have a judge that cares about what you care about. I care about safe neighborhoods. I care about people. So don't just take my word for it. I am rated recommended in the ISBA judicial poll. That's a poll of my peers. I am endorsed by most of the elected officials in Will County. I'm also endorsed by Labor, our Illinois Nurses Association, our heroes that are on the every day. Also by the American Federation of Teachers Local 604, as well as Labor. So take their word. They know what it's like. They know what type of judge that we need, and so do you. So I don't want you to sit this one out. If you haven't already decided who to vote for, I'm asking for your vote. My website is ColetteSaffordForJudge.com. I will be a judge for all, a judge that you can be proud of, and I'm going to make sure that our communities and our neighborhoods are safe.
Can I say one thing not about me
There's a judge in the back, Vicki Breslin. Judge Breslin is running for circuit judge in the Manhattan area in the southern part of Will County. Also, Judge Lance Peterson is here. He's on the appellate court, and I'm sorry. I just wanted to let people out there hear, and we all have campaign signs and literature here. So.
That's true. Before we break away, thank you three so very much. It was so enlightening to be here with you. Please, let's give them a round of applause. And all these candidates are running as Democrats, and no matter who wins in the fall, it will be between saving our democracy or losing it to a dictatorship. I don't care what small scale we're talking about here, or if it's federal, we got to keep Illinois safe. Call me an alarmist, but the judiciary is the last hope of keeping the rule of law and this democracy intact. Remember that when you cast your vote. All three of these are awesome. So, I tell people, vote with your heart in the primary and vote with your head in the fall. So with that, let me just point out, you already pointed out Lance Peterson, Vicki, also the township chairs of, Crete, Lori Summers, she's not here, is she?
No.
Frankfurt, Mark Bennett, the chair for Homer is Sherry Benecki-Cooley. In Manhattan, soon to be chair, James Randolph over there in the corner from Manhattan. And that concludes our Q&A portion of this forum. Please grab a plate, more food, and have another drink. And please ask more questions of the judges. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate everyone who's here.